Welcome to Deep Thought. Relationships affect your worldview. I don't really talk about relationships on this channel, but it affects your worldview. Because when you dealing, whether that's a romantic relationship, relationship with your family, relationship with people you work with, relationship with your friends, it's going to affect your worldview because it's connected with your social class. Because when you are relating with people, you have to relate to them on their level. Yeah, and they got to relate to you on your level. But it can affect your worldview. It depends on who you hanging around. Like, there's always this saying about if you're around 4 poor people, you're going to be the 5th poor person. Or you're around the 4 people who engage in any activity, you will be the 5th person. When it's going to affect you, because one of the things we do without thinking about it, and this is without thinking about it, most of us anyway, we want to connect with the people. So we have to connect to them on their level. If you are a person and you have a wealth consciousness, but you're around, say you start off with a wealth consciousness. If you're around a group of people, whether it's in an intimate relationship, friends, or it's even family who have a poverty consciousness, if you don't make a conscious effort to get away from them, it's going to affect you. Like, you might have someone who might be tending towards a wealth consciousness, but maybe they'll get in a relationship with somebody who has a poverty consciousness. Now, it's easy to say, well, maybe they will come forward and develop a wealth consciousness. And maybe they will. Maybe they will. But a lot of times you can't go by that. You can't go, it's going to affect you. Or you're around friends who really not thinking, oh, how can I make a lot of money? Or they have a poverty consciousness, or they not seeing the world a certain way. They don't have the same worldview. You might have to limit what you do. You might have to limit what you do. Like, let's use the romantic relationship thing. I've talked with some guys, and they say to deal with certain women, they had to limit what they would talk about. They couldn't talk about certain things. They couldn't show their intelligence. Usually they were following their lower head. So they might have wanted to have sex with a certain type of woman. Like, you got some guys out here, yeah, they want that baddie. They want that ratchet who got that big old booty. And they really hurting themselves. They really hurting themselves. One of the things I found personally, the women I've dealt with best were always more on the intellectual side. They were the type who had a bunch of books themselves. They were the type who were professionals. But why was that? Because I could relate to them better. They had a more similar worldview than I did. Now, there's some women, like there was a woman I dealt with back in the day. She would have made a great mother. Not a good mother, a great mother. She was very family orientated, but oriented. I always say orientated. Just let it go. Anyway, that's one of my words. Anyway, one of the things was she was very beautiful. Like, if IG was around then, or she didn't even have to put on like any crazy clothing or anything. All she had to do was show up, and would have had beautiful kids, would have made a perfect mother. Couldn't deal with them. We didn't have the same worldview. Our worldviews were different. Now, some men would have dealt with it anyway, but that might have dropped their worldview. See, you have to think about that. You have to think about my friends. My friendship network is what I would call friends, not acquaintances. I know a lot of people, but my friendship network is actually very small. The people, men and women, I would call friends, that's very small, very, very small, because I have a certain worldview. I have a certain worldview, and I'm looking at stuff a certain way. And when I look back at the women I've dealt with, most of them had that worldview, had a certain worldview, had something I could relate to. And that's very important. But what if I just ignored all that, just went for them just because they had that fat booty? I wouldn't be here now. I probably wouldn't be doing this channel because that affects it. Or if I'm a person with a wealth consciousness, what if I wanted to hang around people with a poverty consciousness? People have to think about that. When you're dealing with anybody, when you're dealing with any individual, any level, you have to think about what are they really thinking about? What's their consciousness? What's their worldview? Because they could rub off on you. You might not think it. And yet it's good to hope that you could raise someone up. And maybe you can raise one person up, but what if you're in a group? Or what if you're in a neighborhood, they have a certain consciousness? What if you're in a neighborhood, they have a certain consciousness, but your consciousness is different. Your consciousness is going in a different direction. Your worldview is different. Automatically we think to be a part, I mean, even if be a part of the crowd, even if we might say at first, oh no, we got to raise them up. That might not happen. Let's just be real. Most people follow the crowd. Most people do. Indeed, say you're a man or a woman and you have a certain worldview, but you have to drop it to be around certain people. Indeed, I remember on one of my many jobs working with this young lady, and she was just very, very naturally beautiful, like gorgeous. And she was real quiet. And someone would think she didn't have a certain worldview or she didn't have a certain level of thinking. And the interesting thing about her was people would deal with her on that level. But then one time she was around me and she said something. I was like, what? It was a SAT word. And I was like, and then I saw her. I said, what'd you just say? And then she just gave me a wink. I was like, oh, okay. She was dropping herself down, but in a way that wasn't good for her. She had to move out of that environment or whatever environment she was in when she wasn't working. And then indeed, that relationship thing, I saw that on many jobs. I couldn't talk about stuff with some of my coworkers. There's a lot of things I didn't talk about. I really kept it business. I kept it business because I would look at them and I would say, well, if I get used to what they're doing, that could affect what I'm doing. Because like I said, even when you're at a certain level, and I will say above them because you're seeing greater. But then if to deal with this person, you have to come down to where they're at. So that's a relationship. Like when you're in a relationship, is that person thinking at the same level of consciousness? You might have a wealth consciousness. Is that person have a wealth consciousness? You might think globally. Does that person have thinking globally? When you're around friends, are y'all at the same general level of consciousness? Like family, and I've seen this with families. Some people, they can see it with their family quicker than anything. They'll move away from their family because their family just not thinking the same way. I've known some people who do that. You know, maybe in the neighborhoods, maybe what's the consciousness of the people who you live around. Like, you remember I had a modest apartment and it was all right at first. But then I realized I needed to move because I started looking at the people they were letting in. It was like we had a different level of consciousness. We had a different level. And they were comfortable there. I was like, nah, I don't want to be around that. I didn't really interact with them. The people who lived in my building at first, they were good, but then they gradually started letting in people who weren't at that level of consciousness. And I said, I have to get away from there. But see, even that, even though it wasn't a personal relationship, anything is a relationship if you interacting with people. I still had to interact with them if I see them. He was like, hey, how you doing? And I saw they were at a certain level. I was like, okay, I can't deal with this. I have to get away from it. Now, the people I'm around now is more where my relationship, more where my worldview is. And you have to think about that. the people that you encountering on a regular basis, are they thinking the same way? And especially if we're talking, and I ain't talking about people you might be acquainted with. You could be acquainted with everybody. Trust me, I'm acquainted with a range of people. But am I friends with a lot of people? No, I'm not. That's because, like I said, the people on the level I want to be on, they have to be thinking a certain way. They have to be thinking a certain way. So I want y'all to think about that. I want you to think about your worldview. And as I said earlier this week, I could probably do a couple months just talking about different things that affect your worldview. A couple months. That's how deep it is. But think about your worldview overall. Think about the different things that can affect it. Very important. So, anyway, that's all I have for today. And I'll get back with y'all next week. Think on this. Think on everything I've talked about this week. Peace and blessings.